Hey everyone, it's Nicole McGinnis, founder of Altitude Press. Today I want to talk about something I'm super looking forward to, and that is our 2025, possibly early 2026, anthology. It's a flash fiction anthology, much as our To the Dogs anthology, which we released in 2024, is an anthology. It's going to be right along these same lines, flash fiction stories. Hopefully we'll have authors from around the world as we did with this To the Dogs anthology. And if you're interested beyond the guidelines I'm going to share today in learning more, feel free to check this out. You can find it on Amazon and some other places, paperback and ebook. So today what I want to do is go over some of the anthology guidelines for our upcoming anthology. I'm not going to cover each one in exquisite detail, and I'm not going to cover some of the additional notes that I actually also want to talk about in a future video. But what I will do is talk about what we are generally looking for this anthology. So if you are a flash fiction writer and you are into our theme and what I'm saying today in this video sounds good to you, please consider sending us your work. We would love to see it. So first off, these submission guidelines can be found on our website, which is altitude-press.com. Be sure to add that little dash or you won't go to the right website. And they have been pretty carefully crafted based on our past experiences with anthologies and working with authors. We want our expectations to be very clear, and we want authors to have the option to sort of get a sense of how we go about communicating with you, because it really does become a communication. Once your story is accepted, there's an editing process involved, there's a contract process, and it's becomes a little bit of a business and a little bit of art, a lot of art, but a little bit of a business at that point. And we do communicate with you as clearly as possible, starting with these guidelines. So our theme for this upcoming anthology is Gen X. We are looking for Gen X characters, themes, culture. Gen X should figure prominently in some way in the stories. That said, we're also interested in some unique, maybe unexpected takes on the Gen X experience from original points of view. So we'd love to avoid the stereotypical, and I love John Hughes, not throwing John Hughes under the bus here, but the stereotypical John Hughes, for example, Gen X experience. Stories do not have to take place in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. They don't have to be written by Gen X authors. So if you are a younger author or an older author and you do not fit into that Gen X demographic, that's totally fine. We would still love to see your work if you have a great concept for a piece of short fiction. Our deadline for accepting stories is July 15th. I am posting this video in mid-January, so we have about 5 months, which should be ample time. After that July 15th deadline, edits and other work on the anthology, some PR work, cover design, everything that goes into creating an anthology, and it's a lot, will really begin in earnest. So we hope for a release date in the fall of 2025. This anthology was released in fall of 24 at the end of September, and that turned out to be a really good season for us for this release. We hit the holiday season after release, which is lovely, and it just works out really well. Also works out pretty well with schedules. So let's talk about genres and categories we'd really love to see in a couple that are just not going to be the right fit for us, kind of no matter what. Okay, so first of all, it's quite broad what we will be willing to take a look at. So literary stories, romance, sci-fi, speculative fiction. We love spec fic. We know it can be kind of an umbrella term, and a lot of things can fit under spec fic, not just sci-fi. But yeah, many things. So speculative fiction, mystery, fantasy, fairy tale retellings. It's an interesting one. Historical fiction, humor/satire, paranormal, magical realism can sometimes go under that spec fic umbrella, and others as well. Our hard no's tend to be horror that is graphic and kind of over the top, and erotica that is graphic and over the top. We're okay with spooky, and we're okay with sexy/romantic, But gratuitous sex, gratuitous violence, it's just not going to work for us, mainly because our target audience demographic is about age 14 to about age 100. So because we go into that younger teen demographic with these anthologies, we are not wanting gratuitous sex or violence. And please no F-bombs. Again, this is not a prudish choice. It's really a marketing choice. And we want to be able to solidly market this to a broad readership. Okay. So we ask for those things. Otherwise, we're pretty open as long as it's fiction. So no essays. Oh, I'm such a lover of essays too. And I know there could be some great ones on this topic, but it's just not right for this anthology. Only fiction, only flash fiction. I'll get to the word count in a minute. So no CNF even. I love creative nonfiction, but it's not going to be a good fit for this anthology because it is so based on real life events. No poetry. I'm currently teaching poetry. I love poetry. It's not going to be right for this anthology. So nothing that isn't fiction. Please, because we ask for world rights, first world rights, and it's a very limited basis. So after the anthology is published, you'll see in a contract, if your story is accepted, that these are limited world rights, that you can submit your story elsewhere after a certain amount of time. So please make sure your stories have not been published elsewhere. This includes social media, personal blog, website. Please make sure you haven't read your story either in front of a live audience or on a YouTube video or other type of video. It really, when we ask for first rights, we really mean first rights. Now, beta readers don't count. So of course, if your beta readers, your friend, family member, coworker, spouse, sibling has read your story and helped give you feedback, that's fantastic. But just not for a general audience, please. We want to have the first rights to your wonderful work. So also our AI policy is fairly, I guess you could say, standard. What is kind of becoming standard across the board. We ask for only human created stories. It's pretty easy at this point in time to tell when something has had an AI influence, when it's been created using AI or sort of been assisted. You know, the writing has been assisted using AI. So we ask that AI plays no part in your story, unless it's part of the story itself, the theme or a character or something like that, which is fine, especially for sci-fi writers. But please do not use AI to create this story at all. It should be created by you. It should be original, unique, and wonderful. And again, in a future video, I'll really talk about what I mean by that, when what I consider to be wonderful for these anthologies. But here, let me not go off on that off-ramp, and let me just stick to these more general guidelines. Word count. We are looking for stories that are solidly between 1,500 words at a minimum, 2,000 words at a maximum. Please make sure your story adheres to that. Sometimes we've gotten stories that are, 700 words, and the author says, well, I hope this will do. And it just won't, because word count is one of the very, very first things we look at when a story comes in. Payment, we do pay $25 per story. So we are a paying market. I know it's not super fancy these days, but it's okay. You've been paid for your work if you've had a story accepted for our anthology. So there will be a contract process. There will be an editing process. Edits typically happen in, I would say, 2 or 3 rounds is pretty typical for us, even when we get stories that are really, really polished. When we first receive them, there's typically a little bit of a conversation, some editing suggestions, and back and forth with the authors. So that's about it for this video. I'm going to stop there so that I don't run really long here, because there's actually quite a bit more I want to discuss about these guidelines. But for anyone who's interested, if what I have said intrigues you and you think I am the person to write a really, really great story that somehow keeps Gen X as its central focus, and you want to send it to us, please do. We would love to see it. So happy writing, and I will see you soon in a future video.